Welcome to the Ripple Project's Glacier Tracking tutorial. This tutorial will illustrate to you how moraines are formed and how you identify these landforms using Google Earth. Moraines are the most important of all glacial landforms, marking former ice margin positions. After watching this tutorial, we hope that you will join us in tracing the past extents of our planet's ice ages. So what are moraines and how are they formed? This animation begins by showing a mountainous region receiving snowfall. Over a period of time, snow accumulates, compacts and crystallizes into ice. And once this ice begins to flow, it becomes a glacier. The higher parts of a glacier consist of an accumulation zone, and here the glacier receives the most snowfall. As a glacier moves down the valley, the ice is increasingly lost to melting. This part of the glacier is called the wastage zone. When accumulation exceeds wastage, the ice front advances, while when wastage exceeds accumulation, the ice front retreats. Notice the ridges forming at the terminus of the glacier. This type of glacial deposit is called till, and till-formed ridges called moraines, in this case terminal moraines. As the glacier moves down the valley, it erodes the sides of the valley and its valley floor. The eroded material is transported at the base of the glacier, inside the glacier, or on top of the glacier. If the net accumulation equals the net wastage over a time period, the ice margin of the glacier is stable. Even though the ice margin is stable, the glacier still has a movement and transport rocks to the ice margin where they become deposited, forming moraines. So now we know what a moraine is and how it is formed. So how do we identify them in Google Earth? Google Earth streams the world over wired and wireless networks, enabling users to virtually go anywhere on the planet and see places in photographic detail. This is not like any map you have ever seen. This is actually a 3D model over the real world based on real satellite imagery. This is perfect to us because it means that we can travel anywhere we want. So let's begin by going to New Zealand. You maneuver in Google Earth by using your mouse cursor. And by using the scroller on your mouse, you can zoom in or zoom out. So let's visit New Zealand. Alpine glaciers leave spectacular records of climate change. Lakes, moraines, and other landforms shaped by past glacier advances and retreats dominates the foreground of nearly all mountain landscapes. The beautiful thing with Google Earth is the 3D function. By holding the scroller down, you can access 3D viewing. Can you see the glaciers and can you see the moraine? Well, let's explore this catchment. If we zoom in a little bit more and tilt the 3D view a bit more, we notice that there's actually ridges coming out of this valley. A way of spotting these ridges is to start by looking at them from above. And one easy way of spotting this ridge is to look at the change in vegetation and the shadow that's cast by the ridge itself. If we zoom up a little bit, you can see that this one side here is a bit darker and it also contains vegetation compared to this less stable side of the ridge. Here we can clearly see that there's a difference between the ridge itself and the slopes of the valley. This ridge is a typical lateral moraine, marking the sides of a former glacier. These moraines are well preserved. Look at the sharp ridge crest. To remember where I have spotted this moraine, I will mark it with a Google Earth place mark, naming it Moraine 3. If we zoom out, we can get a feeling of how big that glacier must have been in the past. Not all moraines look as well preserved and fresh like this one, so how do we identify the less preserved and more degraded moraines? Let's travel to Mongolia. To the left of the Google Earth interface you have two sections. The first one is called Places. Here all your place marks are temporarily saved in a folder called My Places. We're gonna make a new folder to store them in your temporary places. Right click, add, folder, call it moraines. We put my 3 mapped moraines in this folder. There's also another section called layers. Here you have different information that you might want to add to your Google Earth data. For example, borders, to know more exactly where you are. So let's visit Mongolia. So here again we have examples of freshly exposed moraines. One here and also one here. In this case you spot them because of the difference in color of sediment compared between the till and the bedrock slopes. These two terminal moraines have been formed by the erosion and deposition of these two glaciers, or in this case, ice caps. So let's visit an older, more degraded moraine on the other side of this mountain massif. Can you see the moraine? Actually, the moraine in this case is this whole piece of sediment. It's completely covered by vegetation, so the fresh exposed sediment is not apparent here. One of the reasons why we see it so clear is because of a number of abandoned meltwater channels and deflected rivers. Here is one, and here is one, and there's several inside the valley. Once you have spotted several moraines, you can visit the Ripple Project's Glacier Track webpage, and under Start Tracking, you can enter the coordinates for the mapped moraines you have found. For example, you go back to Google Earth, click on your mapped moraine, copy the coordinates, and determine, if you want, whether you think it's a young or an old moraine. You can also add additional comment here if you want. And finally, you can submit your tracking. So now we hope you have an idea what a moraine is, what it represents, and how to identify them in Google Earth. The world is big and there's plenty of unexplored mountain regions out there. Get started by visiting an area you always wanted to visit. Record all the moraines you can spot and think about whether you think they are old or young. Thank you for listening.